So I think given that I started off with ICICI Bank, I think I related very much with what Mahesh was saying as to what banks generally look at with regards to funding a real estate project. NBFCs aren't really very different. I think we are also looking at very similar things with regards to the kind of security we look at, the kind of background, the kind of collaterals that we need to fund real estate projects. But having said that, we have a lot more regulatory flexibility, which banks don't have. Banks are regulated a lot more by RBI. They have a lot more regulations to follow in terms of that they can't fund, like Mahesh said, they can't fund for land. They can't fund for acquisition of a project. They need to have all approvals in place, which is actually a very prudent way of lending in any case. However, being an NBFC, we are not governed by a lot of these regulations. So we can come in at any cycle of the life cycle of the project, from land acquisition to construction funding to mezzanine funding, where you actually have a senior lender, which may be a bank, and you can give a loan which is on a second charge on a project. There are various options available to us and various structures through which we can lend. Um, However, we do have certain regulations which govern us as far as RBI is also concerned. So unlike what Amit would be talking about, which is on the AIF space, we do need to have a regular running coupon. We do need to have some interest payments which are built in on a regular basis, because the model of an NBFC is that of, apart from the equity that we have, we borrow and we lend money, right? So that is predominantly how the NBFC model works. So so having said that, I'll just tell you a little bit about how NBFCs, in the last decade, what has happened. So I think before 2010, I think there were barely any NBFCs who were funding to the real estate sector. There were only banks who were relevant in this space. But from 2011 onwards, the last one decade has actually seen a lot of NBFCs spring up. A lot of NBFCs looking at, and it's actually been a decade where a lot of new developers started venturing into the sector across geographies. So this period has seen a lot of new NBFCs come in, and a lot of large new NBFCs come in. We've seen a lot of business houses like Aditya Birla Group, like L&T Finance, all of these guys actually starting a new real estate lending book, because everybody thought that, yes, this is a sector where it's a cash generating business. You give money to people. It makes you 4 to 5% spread in most cases, and it's a very, very liquid business. So seeing all of those, I think a lot of people grew their balance sheets in the sector. So I think it was a good time to do that. I still feel that the NBFC business is a great business to be in spite of the few names that you took. However, I think the most prudent thing, which is important from an NBFC perspective, apart from what kind of projects we are underwriting, is actually the liability side. Because like I said, unlike banks, we borrow money and we lend money. And that is where some organizations which you named went wrong. Because when the IL&FS crisis happened, a lot of the ALM mismatch happened, and people were not able to meet their liabilities, which were scheduled, which may be shorter term than the asset life, which is generally longer as far as a real estate asset is concerned. It's generally 3 to 5 years. So that mismatch caused the problem. But I think for me now, I'm just going to focus on the asset underwriting part of it, as to how do we evaluate real estate transactions. So for us, I think the biggest and the most important thing is how we onboard clients. I think for that is the first criteria, right? As to whether the person has completed at least 1 million square feet of development, the person has had at least 10 years of experience, and he has had the ability to build what he's aspiring to build, whether he has done that in the past. So these are the few checks which we do before we even onboard our client for a first transaction. Also, the track record of the developer as to how has he behaved with other financial institutions in the past. Today, there are lots of softwares available by which you actually know whether the client is reported SMA1, SMA2, or an NPA at any point in time, during when the business was run. So those are the primary checks which we do. Apart from that, when I come to the kind of projects we look at, I think we at JM have predominantly, and I think most NBFCs have been lending to only the residential real estate sector. So I think 85% of our book would be residential real estate. Where though residential real estate is a quick churning as far as you underwrite it correctly, where you have to evaluate certain aspects of the project before you lend to that. One being obviously the most important being the location of the project, the micro market which you're actually lending in, the kind of brand you're lending to, the name of the developer, because we have seen across the cycles, sales do happen in residential real estate. During the worst time, sales happen. And of course, the 6 months of lockdown was obviously an exceptional period for most people. However, during the whole, starting from Demon to GST to RERA to then, INFS and COVID, we've seen people selling throughout these troubled times. However, a lot of things needed to be in place. So one was, I think, over a period of time, the customer confidence has to be there in the brand which they are buying into, which was lost for a certain period of time as far as the sector is concerned for quite a few developers. So hence, for us, the most important thing was looking at the person you are onboarding or the kind of developer who you're trying to transact with. Second, like I said, was the kind of in the kind of project we were looking at the stage that we came in. There are some developers where we have done transactions with at the land stage as well, where we have helped them give money to acquire a land, or we have given money after the land was acquired and given some money for as a cash out. So those kind of structures are also possible, which we have done. However, that would be a small part. The significant amount of our portfolio would be a mixture of a general corporate purpose loan, which means it could be a takeover of an existing debt or on an ongoing residential project, and a part construction funding. So most of which we call as project funding. So with about 70 to 80% of the portfolio would be centered around an ongoing residential project. Now, we've had certain checks and balances in terms of security. We ensure that we don't lend on development rights, for example, in a place like Maharashtra, where it is very prevalent to have rights on a particular land or a project by way of transfer of development rights and not have access to land. So wherever we have a situation like that, we ensure that we have an additional collateral so that, if there is a need for enforcement, you have proper rights on the project. We also ensure that at every point in time, our security covers are upwards of at least 1.75 times, so that, if there is which we did experience recently, if there is a change in the market, if prices have to come down, if costs have to go up, there is a buffer in terms of the value which we can realize from the project, as well as the loan which has been granted to the project. The major difference between the banks and what differentiates NBFCs over a period of time is the end use of funds. So as far as NBFCs are concerned, there is no restriction on the end use. We can still have a general corporate purpose end use for the funds that we lend to, unlike banks where there are very specific end uses which are prescribed by the regulator. So we are more flexible. However, that comes at a price. Most NBFCs would definitely be ranging from a 13 to a 16, 17% kind of a bracket in terms of their expectations of returns, depending on the risk that we are underwriting. However, I'd like to make a distinction. See, like most NBFCs, like you rightly said in JM, the company which I'm a part of is a focused real estate lending NBFC, right? So most of the NBFCs have a separate team which understands the sector and which deals with the sector differently from how a normal structured credit or a normal corporate lending team would work, because even in some banks there is a differentiated team. So most NBFCs has done that extremely well, right? So to have a separate team which looks at monitoring, because there's a separate way of monitoring these projects, there's a separate way of underwriting, there's a separate way of risk management. So all those aspects are taken care of differently when we are lending to this sector. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. And is there anything I've missed out on, Ashish ji? Please do let me know.
No, I think you're very well covered. Actually, you have, I think, given the complete idea upfront to the participant. how they can approach you, about what kind of funding they can get and all. I think one thing which is missing in this discussion is the timeline, basically. So generally, when the developer is looking for funding, they have this notion in the mind it will take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months kind of difficulty. So when we are going to bank, the banks have different set of procedures. The committees are there, then principal approval, then the final approval. But in case of NBFC, the same timelines are working, or there is a different. So they can suppose because they are giving some premium on the funding, whatever they are getting in terms of pricing, interest rate. So they are looking that if they go to NBFC, they might get the fund faster than the banks. So your take on that? Yes.
No, so I definitely feel there is a time arbitrage between banks and NBFCs. There's no doubt about it because there's a focus team which is working on it. Having said that, I think we do not have multiple layers of committees like most banks do have. We have one credit committee or an investment committee where all our proposals go to, where they are sanctioned or rejected. And these committees meet as often as once or twice a week, right? So our turnaround time can be much faster. Also, our due diligence processes, though we use the best in the title as well as the technical due diligence aspects, but I think the turnaround time, if the focus and everything, if the documents which we need are and the data that we require are available very quickly, it can be as much as about 2 months, door to door. So I think we can turn around faster. Provided the data, but our data requirements sometimes are much larger than what some banks may have. But if that is available, it's a quick turnaround.